Stoic philosophy in practice with Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epicurus. Did you know that? Well, it's true. You can learn about ancient philosophy for free right here. In this episode, we're going to be looking at someone who was a Stoic philosopher during the time of the 1st century. He was actually a contemporary of Seneca. His name was Paconius Agrippinus, and he is perhaps best known for his relationship to another figure from the 1st century, namely the Emperor Titus, son of Vespasian and brother of This man was said to have been a close friend of Titus and was even said to have been a tutor to Titus when he was young, before Titus took the throne. There are very few surviving sources that mention Paconius Agrippinus, so what we know about him is somewhat limited. But there is still enough to get a sense of his life and his ideas and to see how he was a Stoic philosopher. The primary source for the life of Paconius is a letter written by Pliny, the young, who was a Roman lawyer and also a friend of the emperor. In this letter, Pliny is asking the Emperor Trajan for some financial assistance for one of his freedmen, who has fallen on hard times, because he was once a slave to a former senator named Paconius Agrippinus, who was put to death by the Emperor Tiberius. So we get this little snapshot into the life of Paconius and an explanation for why his property had been confiscated and given to his freedmen. But unfortunately, the sources don't really tell us anything more than this. What they do tell us is that Paconius was a freed slave. That would explain why he would have had slaves himself, but also why he might have been able to work his way up to becoming a tutor for the future emperor. What's interesting here is that most of the Stoics that we know about were from wealthy families. Even Epicurus, who supposedly made money writing as a prostitute, was still a wealthy person. But Paconius seems to have come from nothing and worked his way up. We know that the Stoics believed that wealth was not necessary for happiness, but it certainly didn't hurt, and it seems that Paconius may have agreed with this, too, since he set aside money for his former slaves. It is also interesting that he was a freed slave because the Stoics were big on the idea of freedom. It was one of their primary concerns, and so it makes sense that someone who was himself a freed slave would be attracted to the Stoic thought. The reason that Paconius was killed, however, wasn't because he was a Stoic or even because he was a former slave, but because he was related to the emperor's family. His father was Gaius Cassius Longinus, and he had been a friend of Augustus and the uncle of Livia Drusilla, who was the wife of Augustus's stepson, Tiberius. So Paconius was basically related to Tiberius through marriage. And while this would normally have been seen as a good thing, in Tiberius's case it was actually something that he exploited. When Tiberius came to power, he wanted to marry a woman named Julia, but she was already married to a man named Lucius Adi, and so Tiberius had Caenis put to death, which left Julia free to marry him. Well, it turns out that before marrying Julia, Tiberius had her put to death as well. And so all of this is pretty dark. And it gets worse. See, Tiberius suspected that Cassius had tried to dissuade him from killing Caesaros, and so he had him executed as well. And Paconius, who was probably an adult at this point, was put to death for being related to this man. The sources don't say exactly why Tiberius wanted Cicero dead, but it doesn't really matter. All that we need to know is that Tiberius wanted him dead, and Cassius tried to protect him. And then Paconius paid the price for this act of disloyalty. This is where we start to see the real value of Stoicism, because it seems like Paconius was able to take this terrible injustice and turn it into an opportunity to grow as a person. Just think about it. He lost his father unjustly and had his property cut. But instead of just wallowing in his grief and anger, he used this experience to become a better Stoic. We don't know exactly what happened after this, but we do know that he became a tutor to the future Emperor Titus. Now again, we don't know exactly how he landed this job, but it is not too hard to imagine that someone connected to the imperial family might have recommended him. After all, he was related to the emperor by marriage. We do know that Titus was only 4 years old when his mother, the future empress, died, and so he may have been a bit of a handful, but Paconius was able to step in and help raise him. And later in life, Titus would remember this and repay Paconius' kindness. When Paconius fell out of favor with the Emperor Tiberius and was put to death, Titus was only 9 years old. But apparently he remembered his tutor and wrote to the emperor asking for his tutor's property to be returned to him. And this is what prompted Pliny the Younger to write the letter that we mentioned earlier, asking Trajan to help out his former master's freedmen. So we can see that even after Paconius was gone, he continued to influence people for the better. And this was the real value of Stoicism. It wasn't just a set of abstract ideas, but a way of living your life that helps you overcome obstacles and make the world a better place. Even though he was only a minor figure in Roman history, we can learn a lot from the example of Paconius. He showed us that we can find opportunities for growth even in the midst of suffering, and that one person can make a real difference in the world. That's it for this episode. But if you want to learn more about Stoic philosophy, check out the other videos in our series. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and leave a like. Thanks for watching.